Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options in Play video update. So, another week in the books, another week to look forward to, right? Just checking out some of the names we have coming up this next week. Earnings season obviously winding down, but as you saw this past week, it's still a pretty good lineup, okay? So even though you don't have like 50 to 100 names reporting every night, the names that are reporting, for the most part, pretty interesting. And definitely some bigger names this coming week. It's going to be much more retail focused, but there are some interesting tech names too. So a pretty good lineup. Um, some big potential movers. So let's hop into it, all right? So first things first. Monday before the open, PDD. So a newer China IPO. All right. Not a name that I've traded much. Don't have a lot of history with it, but this one is before the open on Monday. They're looking for about 3.25. Those are monthly options, though. Um, China names, right? The story with China names right now, just in the last 2 weeks, is what type of upside are you going to get with just consistent headlines, right? Consistent trade tariff headlines, escalating trade tensions. So it's been really, really tough to get paid on the upside on these types of patterns. I mean, right now, PDD does actually look a little bit more bearish. It's below not all of its moving averages, but below a bunch. It's as you can see, it's hanging just above a pretty key area of support. So I guess I'd lean a little bit more bearish, but personally, might just be one of those ones I avoid. I mean, just until a lot of like these headlines like blow past, and you can kind of focus back on the numbers again. After the close Monday, only Nordstrom, so not a name I trade very often. So this is the only one scheduled actually, and it doesn't really have a compelling look one way or the other. It doesn't scream like bullish or bearish to me. Also, it hasn't really been a huge mover in results recently. There was a couple of years ago a stretch where it was a much bigger mover, but recently it hasn't really been much of a mover. So I'll probably just leave that one alone. Tuesday before the open, here's a big one: Home Depot. So pricing in about 6 points or so. Definitely one of the biggest names of the week. Um, Overall, the numbers have been pretty solid the last few quarters, right? So pretty solid numbers. The stock has rolled off its high. Um, the biggest issue with Home Depot is that it has a history of really weak reactions to earnings. So even though they've had pretty solid numbers and pretty solid guidance over the past year, it's actually closed lower on the day of its report 4 quarters in a row. All right, so that's a pretty good stretch. Um, so just using that as a guide, I mean, I feel like you'd either have to be slightly bearish just based off performance over the past year, or wait it out, look for a dip, and then try for a swing, because I mean that's also what's worked well, is like buying the dip after earnings, because there's been some really nice runs post earnings. So I mean, like, those are like the two scenarios I feel like for Home Depot. Uh, Kohls, another name Tuesday morning. So they're pricing at about 5 points. We played this one this past week as a sympathy trade for like the retail reports, and there wasn't really any action. There really wasn't a whole ton of volatility with those. So I'm probably just going to avoid Kohls because not only were like the reports not that volatile this past week, but now there's like not a whole lot of surprise because you already had Macy's, you already had Walmart and Dillard, so I don't know what type of surprise is left, so probably just going to leave that one alone. Another retailer, another big one actually, TJX. So this is Tuesday before the open. It's priced in about 3.25. And I think this one's interesting more so because it's the first off-price name to report. I like playing like the first reports of particular groups or sectors, right? And the off-price kind of trades on their own sometimes. So TJX, the first off-price name. Coming off a solid quarter, the stock has been acting really great just up until about like the last like 2 weeks. So thinking bullish position, targeting like a move back into like that high from like a month ago. Um, you know, Really strong trend. So bullish move to reset the trend, retest the high. That's what I'm thinking on TJX. Tuesday after the close, more retail. Nordstrom. It's pricing in 3 points. You probably don't need me to tell you that the chart looks absolutely horrendous. Hasn't had an uptick in a month. Um, awful, bearish chart, but expectations are probably at the same time very low, right? Um, this was a recent swing trade, right? Worked out pretty well. And, again, stock has gotten crushed. Expectations are very low. Probably just be on the sidelines. It's kind of hard to figure out what's priced in and what's not. Plus, it had some good, a pretty good trade on it just in the last like 2 months. So maybe wait it out, see where it is after earnings, and then maybe revisit it for a trade idea. Urban. This one's priced in about 2.5, and actually, I think this is one of the more interesting retail setups because it's basically in no man's land technically. Let's see when I go back a little while. So you can see that it's kind of in no man's land. It lost this 30 area of support, right? So 30 was kind of an area of support, and now underneath there's really not a whole lot until maybe like the low 20s, right? So kind of in like open space. Options at 2.5 don't seem too bad. Um, it hasn't been a huge mover on earnings recently, but options are also a little bit cheaper, and technically it seems like we could do for a move. So maybe look at like a cheap strangle. Okay, maybe not expecting like a 5 point move, but 3 to 4 points seems like it could potentially have that in the cards. So yeah, maybe like a cheap strangle on that one. Also, SE. Um, so this one's been a really hot stock, obviously, since like this March pop, and there's been a lot of call buying on it. Basically, didn't go into earnings, more or less at its 52-week high, and if the numbers look good and the momentum keeps up, I mean, this seems like it might have a day with the 30. So maybe look at like a speculative bullish bet. Options are priced in 4 points though, so a little bit more on the expensive side, but at the same time, it does seem to be like wide-ranging, more volatile names. So something maybe out of the money up in like that 30 area. Wednesday before the open, we have a big tech report, ADI, analog devices. So it's priced in at about 5.5. Going to be a tough backdrop right now for this name. Because the chip stocks are losing a lot of steam, and the trade headlines are definitely weight. Especially, I mean, just in the last couple of days, you had the Huawei headlines. So it's just overall, it's a very tough setup. The chart doesn't look that great. Um, Chip stocks have been a little bit tougher to get paid on. Just generally speaking, the last couple of weeks, Nvidia, AMAT on Friday, both didn't move as much as they were pricing in. So I'm thinking this one's going to be an avoid. Even though it's a big name, don't like the setup. Probably going to be an avoid for me. Lowe's, big retailer here. So 575 or so is what's priced in. The thing with Lowe's is that it's definitely going to react to Home Depot earlier in the week, right? So Home Depot reports the day before. So Lowe's will definitely react to that. So the way I view it is like, maybe if it has like a big pop on the Home Depot number, then maybe you can look for a bearish trade. If it has a big drop on the Home Depot number, maybe look for a bullish trade, right? Um, but other than that, you tend to see those really big reactions off of the Home Depot number. So I guess like the three scenarios where I'm going to look at it is if it has a big move down, a big drop, a big move down, or a big rally, or maybe if it's just like flat, then there could be some potential there. So that's kind of how I view Lowe's. Target. This is a big one next week too. So it looks much worse technically now than it did just about a month ago, right? Stock has just fallen apart. Uh, so here's the thing, like this really sharp, quick move down that opens up trading ranges, that expands volatility, right? And the weekly straddle is priced in about 4 points, and just on itself, like that seems like it would be light. But then you throw in like this really sharp recent drop, expanding daily trading ranges, right? You got room below. You obviously have plenty of room higher. So this is one that stands out to me as a decent like volatility candidate. So like a strangle or a straddle. So that's kind of how I'm gonna view target this week. Just really sharp recent slide, gaps above, plenty of room below. It has a history recently of moving more than 4 points, right? So back in November, just it was almost a 10-point move. So a few things lining up that seem to indicate this could be bigger than what's expected there. If you have CORP, this is a pretty nice looking apparel name. They're looking for about $6. Um, It is coming off a strong quarter. Okay, the stock had a really nice extension after that, and it just bumped up into like this longer term area of resistance. So pulled back just in the last week or so, but overall it's within striking distance of a kind of a key upside resistance area, right? Um, Seems if they can deliver another good number, takes out 95. This thing could have a day with 100. So with the stock in the low 90s, measured move breakout up to maybe past 100. Seems like there could be some upside potential on that one. Wednesday after the close is another China name, so C-Trip. This had been one of the better China names, but obviously rolled over the last couple weeks. They're pricing in 3.5. Which doesn't actually seem too bad for the options. It's definitely exceeded that the last couple quarters. So again, like the options seem interesting. The problem is just lumping these all together. It's just constant headlines make for a tough setup. And Baidu worked great, but that was also a bearish setup, right? So um, I'll keep an eye on this one because I think it is interesting from an option point of view. Technically not as interesting, but definitely one of the China names that I will be watching next week. ELLE Brands. So they're looking for about a little over $2. The nice thing with ELLE Brands is that, good or bad, this is a pretty consistent mover when it has earnings and monthly sales. So obviously, like the chart doesn't look particularly great. I mean, it's at its 52-week low. But a little over $2, it does seem like there could be some potential there, just with like the options, like the way they're priced. So maybe like a cheap strangle could be a way to look at this. I don't know if you're going to see like a $5 or $6 move, like some of the quarters over the past year, but at $2 does seem like there could be some upside potential in that one. SNPS. So here's another tech name. So it's priced in at about $8, so 8 points. It's stronger software stock. Just at its 52-week high, right? Been on a really nice run this year. Volatility has really been drying up around earnings, though, so it's kind of like a red flag, just in terms of laying out money. So I guess this falls into like the software plan, the strategy that I do with like a lot of these kind of similar setups in the software stocks is ones that have run into their highs, really strong trends, have run into their 52-week highs, had earnings, hold off, see if there's a pullback into like trend support, and then snag it for like a rebound trade. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. So that's what I'm gonna be watching on SNPS. Thursday before the open, Best Buy, more retail. So Best Buy may actually be a good buy this quarter. So it's pricing in 5 points. Coming off a strong print in February, stock had been acting nice. Again, you're gonna hear this a lot, just up until the last like 2 weeks. Yeah, the thing with Best Buy is that a lot of their supply comes from China, so it does have some more headwinds than some other retail names. But even with like the question marks, it does seem though that there could be some upside if it can like deliver. It could snap back into like the mid 70s pretty quick. So maybe something more speculative on the bull side, but it definitely falls in the more speculative camp, I think. SINA and Weibo. So I'm gonna kind of lump these two together. So looking for like 6 points and then 5 points respectively. SINA 6, Weibo 5. Both charts are kind of similar, and again, kind of tough setups for like these China tech names at the moment. But if they keep getting hit into earnings, then maybe this sets up like a nice chance for like an oversold bounce, because they're coming into both are coming into really big areas. Well, Sina's below, but Weibo, maybe I'll focus on Weibo. It's coming into like a really big area of support down here. It's bounced like a bunch of times over the last like 7 to 8 months. Thursday after the close, it's gonna be a little bit bigger of a tech night. So Autodesk, price in 14 points, strong software stock at a 52-week high, blah blah blah. You've heard this before, rinse and repeat, right? Sold off last quarter, even though the numbers were good. So I'm going to be watching for, I guess, the same thing. Just if that's what it did last quarter in a very similar setup, then I'm going to be watching for it again this quarter. Deckers, kind of a volatile retailer. So this is the Uggs brand. 15 points is what's priced in. Coming off a 19-point move last quarter. Stock had been acting strong. I feel like after last quarter's beat, probably leaning more bullish, but it seems like expecting that type of magnitude move higher is a little bit of a stretch. So maybe to get risk down, you look at some like spreads or flies or even calendar spreads. Um, so that's what I'm thinking with that. HPQ, um, the HPQ crashed last quarter, so moved over 4 points. Right, this quarter one of the options only priced it in like $1, so like 1 point. So like to me, like that kind of like flags go off and like only priced it in 1 point after it moved four last quarter. So it seems like it sets up well for a straddle. Plus, like the chart's been in a reasonably tight consolidation too, so kind of like that one for like a straddle idea. Intuit, another big tech name. So it got hit well, a few weeks ago on they gave preliminary guidance. It's rolled over. What's interesting about this is that it's off its 52-week high, came into like a kind of a support area. The 100-day is bounced. Maybe you look for like a bounce back quarter trade here. So I mean, it's not really a bounce back quarter because it's basically a bounce back from the guide. It's a better way to describe it. So maybe like target like a position at the gap, so like the 264, 265 area. So they're pricing in about 12, but that gap would be about 15 to 16, 17 in that range. So maybe look at something. If the guidance is solid, maybe it snaps back to close that gap from the guide back in beginning of May. And then the last one that night is Splunk, also an interesting software stock. So they're pricing in 11, and it is near its 52-week high, but it's actually it never retested the high from the last time I reported, which is a little bit different than some of the other names. So it's been kind of stuck underneath 140 for a few months. Pretty tight little consolidation. I feel like it's from like a valuation standpoint, there could be some upside. Also, technically, from like a chart point of view, there could be some upside. A pent up move through 140, so a pent up move through like 4 month resistance. You're probably looking at something in like a 10% measured move into like the mid 150s. So at 11 points, seems kind of interesting to me. So maybe one of the names that actually, one of the software names you actually go after, even though it's up closer to its 52-week high. Thinking maybe like a strangle, maybe skew it a little bit more like in favor of the bull side though. And then last but not least, Friday before the open is Foot Locker. So pricing in about 575 or so. Coming off a big move last quarter, actually has a history of pretty big moves, but last quarter was particularly big, and that was about 8.5 to 9 points. Gave back all those gains pretty quick, and it's actually down about 10% from when it even reported that quarter. So it hasn't been acting great. Maybe you look at a speculative strangle, right? Just because options are priced in at 575, it moved 8.5 to 9 last quarter. Um, Technically, it just doesn't look great. It doesn't look too compelling one way or the other, but it does have history of really big swings occasionally. And last quarter moved well over what's pricing in this quarter. So maybe you could look at it just from like an option pricing point of view. Maybe it's worth a shot. But bullish or bearish doesn't. I don't have a really great read on it. Doesn't look that great either way. But it would be kind of like a strictly option pricing point of view. Is why I would look at Foot Locker. All right. So you see what I mean, right? I mean, so yes, every night we don't have 50 names reporting, but every night there are at least a handful of interesting ones. So it's actually kind of nice, a little bit more refreshing because you can really focus on on like a smaller grouping of names and really like target like the bigger more interesting setups versus like when it's like 50 and 100 names, then you kind of get spread out. So still lots to look forward to, still plenty of action, a lot of things on the calendar, and hopefully volatility remains high because that just creates all sorts of trading opportunities. All right, so have a fantastic night. And from a programming note, we got our option session coming up this Monday, so definitely be sure to stick around for that Monday after the close. Plenty to talk about as always, especially with like the new wave of volatility that we're seeing. So that's Monday after the close. So definitely stop on by for that. All right. So have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you guys on Monday.